A cloud approaching the far north of Scotland too as the next weather system moves in here. Temperatures, towns and cities generally holding up, perhaps a touch of frost again in the countryside for one or two prone spots to start Wednesday. And again, fairly dry, bright day, best of the sunshine across southern parts. Elsewhere, variable amounts of cloud, and then later on we'll see rain approaching the Highlands, and this slowly pushing south and eastwards across Scotland through the day. Drier and brighter Thursday and Friday for many, and temperatures also start to rise, reaching the low 20s.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, the Conservatives are in crisis, but the necessary fight back started at the launch of the Conservative Democratic Organisation over the weekend, where Priti Patel became the most influential Tory MP yet to attack the Prime Minister's leadership.
The centre of the party spent more time with us, listening, engaging, then I think it's fair to say we would not have seen over 1,000 of our friends and colleagues even lose their seats in recent local elections.
Before Tory business giant Lord Peter Cruddas made this extraordinary offer to the PM.
Rishi Sunak can call me up today and say to me, Peter, we've seen the CDO, what they're proposing, the constitutional changes. If you did that tomorrow, I'd donate £1 million.
But Tory party MPs and activists made clear where their loyalties lie with Boris. So I'll implore Rishi and the Tory leadership to embrace democracy and Conservative principles immediately. That's in my digest next. They're my superstar panel weigh-in. Tonight, I'm joined by Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda DeLucy. And stay tuned, by the way, because I'll have the rest of those exclusive and very revealing interviews with the former Home Secretary Priti Patel and Lord Cruddas later in the show, where they're going to reveal whether it's time to bring back Boris. Elsewhere tonight, as the odd little Sussex mouthpiece Omid Scobie miraculously remembers evidence that helps Prince Harry's phone hacking lawsuit after years of silence, will the Duke of Delusion come limping home to the UK when his marriage to Meghan ends in tears? They're not my words, by the way. That's the bombshell claim of former Labour Minister Chris Mullen in his controversial new book. But Petronella Wyatt, Ingrid Seward and Ernest Owens will have their say when they do battle in the clash soon. Also on the way, Superwoman Suella hits out at Britain's Open Borders Brigade.
It's not xenophobic to say that mass and rapid migration is unsustainable in terms of housing supply, public services or community relations.
So is the Home Secretary right to say that it's not bigoted to want to stop the boats? That's our big debate tonight. Plus, it seems Scove's decision to call in the lawyers and a crisis PR team has done nothing to ease the excruciating on-air tension with Holly.
Skip to my side, here you go. Give it a go. Don't hurt yourself.
Bill, put your knees on the ground.
Oh, they've got to stay on the ground?
Yeah,
stay on the
otherwise
ground.
that's like...
Otherwise that you're really,
Oh, make it stop. Amid an A-list boycott of the show, does that awkward performance today mean the end has come for ITV's golden couple? Fleet Street icon Calvin McKenzie has big news on this. He'll weigh in later. And in ATV exclusive, the victims of this horrific attack by a hard-left trans Starbucks employee speak out for the first time. How does it feel to be verbally and physically abused simply for calling an employee a lady? Well, they're going to join me live in the studio later this hour. As ever, stay tuned for tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press, and I'll crown a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel. Hope you had a fabulous weekend. I was in beautiful, sunny Bournemouth at the Conservative Democratic Organisation conference. Lots to tell you, lots of bombshells coming this hour in my interviews with Priti Patel and Lord Cruddas. First, though, the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thanks very much indeed. Our top story tonight on GB News. As you've been hearing, the Home Secretary has insisted it's not hypercritical for her, the child of migrants, to push for lower migration in the UK. In a speech earlier today, Suella Braverman defended the government's plan to cut net migration, saying it isn't racist to want to control borders. She also argued that mass and rapid migration would be a burden on housing and public services. And she said the UK should be instead focused on creating highly skilled workers at home.
There is no good reason why we can't train up enough truck drivers, butchers, fruit pickers, builders or welders. Brexit enables us to build a high-skilled, high-wage economy that is less dependent on low-skilled foreign labour.
Well, the UK will be training up Ukraine's pilots to fly Western fighter jets, but it has no plans to provide them with the actual planes. At a meeting at Chequers today, the Prime Minister told President Zelensky that providing warplanes wasn't straightforward, but Rishi Sunak did promise further air defence missiles and drones under the condition they're only used over Ukrainian soil.
One thing we will be doing, starting actually relatively soon, is training of Ukrainian pilots, and that's something that we've discussed today. We're ready to implement those plans in relatively short order, which will mean that we're training Ukrainian citizens to become absolutely combat-ready aircraft pilots.
Well, President Zelensky, for his part, thanked the Prime Minister, saying that air power is an important issue for his country's defences.
Today we spoke about the jets, very important topic for us, because we can't control the sky, you know it. So I think you know everything deeply, because we're real partners. Rishi knows all the details, what's going on our battlefield. Thank you very much. And we want to create this Jets coalition.
Zelensky. Now, a former Met police officer allegedly missed an opportunity to properly investigate Wayne Couzens before he murdered Sarah Everard. Samantha Lee attended a disciplinary hearing today, accused of failing to make the correct investigative inquiries over 2 incidents when Couzens exposed himself to female staff at a restaurant in Kent. It's claimed there were issues with witness statements and evidence, and her investigative work was allegedly rushed. Miss Lee is said to have breached the force's standards on duties and responsibilities, charges she denies. The hearing's expected to last several days. And the police watchdog is investigating after an 11-year-old boy was tasered at a holiday park in Scotland. Police were called to a caravan park near Ayr just after 11 o'clock on the 22nd of March. The child, who was holding a knife, fell to the ground after being tasered by police. Police Scotland say the incident has been referred now to the Investigations and Review Commissioner. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Conservatives are facing a popularity and policy crisis. Once the flag bearer of Thatcherite principles, the Tories of 2023 have morphed into a big state, high-tax, centre-left party, seemingly driven by globalist forces and the civil service blob. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and his authoritarian Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, were both put into office in an anti-democratic coup. And the last 2 Prime Ministers, approved by party members, by the way, have been forced out when the deep state conspired with the mainstream media, especially the British Bashing Corporation. As a result, I believe democracy in the UK is facing a genuine crisis. And if we're not careful, there will soon be one-party rule in Britain for the next generation. A fight back is beyond necessary. The good news is that it began this weekend at the Conservative Democratic Organisation in Bournemouth, where I joined hundreds of proud members of the Tory grassroots alongside stars of Boris Johnson's cabinet like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Nadine Dorries and Priti Patel. But Lord Peter Cruddas, one of Britain's top businessmen, who's behind the movement and is a long-term ally of Boris, insisted that this wasn't simply a campaign to return the former PM to number 10. Indeed, he made this £1 million offer to Rishi Sunak if he is prepared to make the Conservatives conservative again.
I would love to be able to donate to the Conservative Party tomorrow, providing it reverts back to centre-right policies and supports members. And the way to do that is very simple. Rishi Sunak can call me up today and say to me, Peter, we've seen the CDO, what they're proposing, the constitutional changes, come in and make those changes to the party. Let's give more democracy back to the members.
And if he did that tomorrow, you would be back in?
If he did that tomorrow, I'd donate £1 million.
Wow. But the spectre of Boris, the election-winning machine, still hung over Bournemouth, as Priti Patel admitted to me after accusing Sunak of overseeing, quote, managed decline of her beloved party.
Over 90% of people here say that they are Team Boris rather than Team Rishi. Isn't the solution obvious, Priti?
In my view, Boris would have won us the next election. It also happened to his successor, a couple of months later, and that cannot be right.
But couldn't he still win you the next election? Isn't that the point?
Well, there you go.
So I got our senior producer, Ben Leo, to put that question to the people. Team Boris or Team Rishi?
It's the one big question of the day at the CDO conference in Bournemouth. Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak? We asked MPs and Tory members to grab their party's future by the balls and pick their man for leader.
We should never, ever have got rid of him. However, there is no turning back. One, thank you, boss. But Rishi, we've got to get behind you to win the next election.
Well, because he was unfairly taken out of power.
We've got to stick with Rishi, but I'm Team Boris.
Boris does stuff
Boris gets stuff done.
Rishi, why Rishi?
Quite frankly, I think with Boris, he's too unpredictable, and he's a steady set of hands.
Did he deserve to be taken out by a piece of cake?
Somebody wanted him out.
It was a stitch-up.
Exactly.
I'm going to be back the leader of our party, so I'm going for Team Rishi. We can't change before an election.
He should have never been voted out. So,
Boris.
Boris, yeah. Well, Rishi hasn't been voted out yet, has he?
No, but he wasn't voted in.
I know, that's the problem.
Now, many good folk I spoke to at the conference believe a split in the Conservative Party between the left and right-wing factions is the only way to solve this mess, but that would overturn decades of proud history. So I think the solution is the Tory leadership realising they must embrace democracy and Conservative principles now, or give up the country to a socialist gang who aim to destroy it. But to respond now, my superstar panel. Top Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the former MEP and political commentator Belinda de Lucy. So, Carol Malone, look, it was very clear to me in Bournemouth. And by the way, look, we've got the ballot box here, and you can see Boris is almost overflowing. Only literally a couple in the tank for poor Sunak. And there was a real sense of frustration among Tory members, Carol.
I get that, but I think Jacob Rees-Mogg is right. You can't change just before an election, and I get why people are frustrated. You know, I'm a bit frustrated because he's not doing anything big. He's not doing anything Tory. I think it was Professor John Curtis, you know, the most famous of all political scientists, said he has to do something braver and he has to do it sooner, and I think that's exactly right.
Is Lord Cruddas right when he says the Tories are almost becoming a left-wing party? Because that's shocking.
No, I don't think Rishi is the least bit left-wing. I think he's much more right-wing than Boris was. I think what he is not, he's not a character like Boris, but, you know, he needs to be doing stuff that the Tories would identify with, like the inheritance tax, like the repeal of the EU laws, like ordinary tax. He's got to revisit Brexit and make it work. And I think he's not doing anything big. And what, you know, he's got some things he's got to finish this year. 3 things. One of the things is phase 1 is economy, NHS, stop the votes. Phase 2 next year is projections. But he has to be doing big things right now because he wants to do the election, I think it's in October 2024, which only leaves him a few months to get ahead in the polls. And I think, you know, a lot of the Labour polls have been exaggerated to say how far Labour's ahead. The projection for just before the election, the projection for Labour is that there will only be 7 points ahead, which is beatable, I think. But if he's going to do that, he has to start now and he has to be thinking big. And he's not doing that. He's doing lots of small things that we're thinking, that's cosy, that's comfortable, that's good. He's done quite a few bits of stuff in the NHS, 800 more ambulances. He's done lots of stuff. But they're not shouting about what they've done, which is, I think, is a shame. But I think he could be good if he got, as Professor John Curtis said, a little bit braver.
The problem is, Belinda, this was a thrashing at the local elections. So the Conservative Party are facing a thrashing at the general election, and I think a technocratic approach with, as Carol says, sort of tinkering around the edges, that's not enough anymore. Plus, we have this latest Brexit betrayal, which, as a former Brexit Party MEP, must infuriate you.
Well, I mean, Rishi doesn't seem to have any courage of conviction anymore. He's done so many U-turns. Anything he does pledge before the next election, why would we believe him?
But he was a Brexiteer originally.
Well, yeah, but he never campaigned
for Brexit. More so than Boris,
actually. He never campaigned for Brexit. You never saw him up and down the streets.
He was a backbench MP at that
but he is in office, but not in power, Dan. Now, who knows who facilitated his rise to power? But they were not Brexiteers. Rishi reminds me of a sort of irrelevant little mouse on puppet strings that's more obsessed with the international stage and doesn't want to upset Biden and the EU than make the bold decision this country needs to reduce immigration.
So it's the globalist elite.
It is. It's hyper-globalism. The Rishi Hunt cabal support hyper-globalism, mass immigration, high taxes, and the Conservative voters do not want it.
No, they don't. Benjamin Butterworth, I imagine that you and your ilk want to snare at this brilliant meeting at the weekend in Bournemouth, where grassroots Conservatives gathered to actually say, we can save our party. But go on, Sneer away.
Go on.
I think you're all mad. I mean, so many barn pots in such a small space.
Oh.
You look at that conference and all the lights are on, but nobody is home.
Oh,
that is the message that you get from it. And the truth is that actually, I think a lot of decent people will see not only that conference, but the latest hard right conference that has happened today with people like Suella Braverman.
Oh, it's not hard right, mate. It's not hard right. Believe me, the Conservative Party is at the moment tacking towards the centre-left. So these are not hard right policies. You've got to get that through your head. They are centre-right policies. To control the borders, that is a centre-right policy. To cut taxes and the size of the state, that is a centre-right policy. To demand reality when it comes to biology, that is a centre-right policy. So do not try and throw far-right smears at this.
None of this is where the electorate is. I mean, you, who defends credit card Liz Truss like there's no tomorrow, a woman that bankrupted this country.
You don't think the electorate is on for stopping the boats? Are you serious?
Or cutting immigration.
Or cutting taxes?
Yes. Seriously.
What land do you live in,
I can't get a word in.
Well, you can't because you're talking tosh there.
Can't get a word in.
Yes, you can't.
The electorate would love to stop the boats, but it's the Tories that are letting them in, so I don't know why you're blaming other people. And the truth...
I'm just fascinated to know what you think is hard right about these policies, because I think they are centre-right policies.
I mean, the truth is that, you know, the Tories decided to swap Prime Minister 3 times in about as many months last year.
Big mistake.
And here you are advocating swapping it yet again, like you don't give a damn about people's mortgages and quality of life. It's all just a game to Tories like you. You were the one demanding that
Boris Johnson went. That was you. And you will remember, Benjamin, because we had many discussions about it on this show, alongside Carol, we were the ones saying, no, he's a democratically elected Prime Minister, he's doing great stuff, ignore the media. So you were the one that created this chaos.
Well, I mean, it's just typical of the hard-right nutters like you. You always blame someone else. And the truth is, it was thinly disguised on Priti Patel's face. She just wants to throw Rishi Sunak and get Boris Johnson back in. It's all a merry-go-round to these people. They don't give a damn about normal people's lives.
Final word, Carol.
The bottom line is, there are a lot of disillusioned Tory voters out there. To get them back, Rishi has to do something big, and he needs to start doing it now.
Because if they do not turn out, they'll finish. The Tory base has to turn out, or Sunak is finished. It doesn't matter how many centrists he appeals to. If he loses his base, he loses the election.
There's only one difference between Labour and Tories now, because they're a unity party, is that Labour want to allow more men to have access to naked women in changing rooms. That's the only thing that's the difference between
Carol Malone,
John Curtis, you are not.
Panel, do stand by. But coming up, I'll bring you the rest of that exclusive sit-down with Boris Johnson's biggest backer, Lord Crudders. Tune in to hear the Tory business giant's extraordinary £1 million offer to the PM, plus much more. But up next, in the clash, is that odd little Sussex mouthpiece, Omid Scobie, miraculously remembers evidence that helps Prince Harry's phone hacking lawsuit after years of silence. Will the Duke of Delusion come limping home to the UK when his marriage to Meghan ends in tears? That's the bombshell claim of the former Labour Minister Chris Mullin in his controversial new book. But Petronella Wyatt, Ingrid Seward and Ernest Owens will have their say when they do battle next. Let me know what you think. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me. Vote in our poll at GBNews. We're back with The Clash straight after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Only on GB.
Calvin McKenzie with the latest on Philip Schofield soon, but first the clash. And Harry's war on the British press continued today with his lapdog Omid Scobie taking the stand to give evidence at his phone hacking trial against Mirror Group newspapers. The Sussex's mouthpiece claims he heard the Daily Mirror's then editor Piers Morgan discussing use of voicemails when he was on work experience at the paper in 2002. Although I have to say, I'm not sure how much I trust what he has to say in this court case, given that he also claimed that he had never socialised with Prince Harry, despite the fact that in the book, Finding Freedom, he recounts how he once went for drinks with Prince Harry. So where was he lying? In court or in his book? But anyway, as Harry and Meghan's traditional base continue their unwavering support, a damning new critique of the pair has surprisingly come from the respected diarist and former Labour MP Chris Mullen. In his latest book, the lefty former Daily Mirror journalist controversially calls Meghan Markle a cuckoo who suffers from, quote, woke Californian hang-ups. And in a sensational, outspoken attack, Mullen predicts Harry will come, quote, limping home to Britain when their marriage ends in tears. But what do you think? Is former Labour Minister and diarist Chris Mullen right that Prince Harry will come limping home when his marriage to Meghan ends? Dan at gbnews.uk. Vote in our poll at GB News on Twitter. But lacing up their gloves on this clash tonight is American commentator Ernest Owens, columnist, friend of the Queen, Petronella Wyatt, and editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, Ingrid Seward. So Petronella, I mean, very strong statement from Chris Mullins, especially given he's on the left and a lot of Labour folk seem to love Harry and Meghan for some reason. But he's right, isn't he?
Yes, he's completely right. Funny thing is that a lot of people on the left aren't woke. And Harry is not woke either. You could say that Harry is the archetypal old-fashioned Englishman. He was brought up a royal prince. His tastes are those of a very old-fashioned Englishman, mucking about in the countryside, shooting things. He loved his time in the army. I mean, he's not suited to the world of California at all. And I can't see him continuing on his own in America because there's no career that he could sort of possibly do. I mean, his career, so to speak, has been based on his royal connections and trashing his family. So I can't see him sort of getting a job. And also, Americans are not great with the hereditary principle. So I think Harry, for example, on its own, if it all went wrong, would quickly find himself totally friendless in America.
Ingrid Stewart, you're not totally in agreement with Chris Mullen on this.
No, I'm not. And normally I agree with Petronella, but I don't on this occasion. I think the last thing Harry would ever want to do, A, is leave Meghan or allow Meghan to leave him, and B, return to this country. He doesn't want to return to this country. He's really happy in California. That's where his source of income is. That's where his children are. That's why his children are probably likely to remain because, you know, if they were to divorce, the Californian law, I believe, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but it usually favours the woman and also that his
So she's trapped him in California now. Ernest, you're saying why?
It's rubbish. This is rubbish. Like, there's no sign that they're going to be downward. I think this is just a situation where I think you all have buyer's remorse over there in Great Britain. I think that you all really pushed them out and really pushed, you know, Harry out, Prince Harry. And now that he's really moving on his life and letting go, you all are starting to create your own narratives. Some of these people are creating their own narratives to try to justify the reality that he will come back. He's not coming back. Before he even got married, he had concerns about the way that he lived his life. He's always been a rebel at heart, and whether he's with her or not, which I think they're going to be together for a very long time, he's not going right back to his brother or his father, and that's just that.
Ernest, I promise you, no buyer's remorse this end. No buyer's remorse this end, I promise you. The thing is, Petronella, though, you only have to look at the track record of Meghan Markle to understand why Chris Mullen would feel this way. I mean, she dumped her fiancé by sending husband. She dumped her husband by sending the wedding ring back to him in the post, and that's how the bloke found out.
Look, I can't speculate as to the state of their marriage. I'm not in their marriage.
Okay,
if they were to break up, I see Ingrid's point, but I certainly see him leaving America because I think he would feel very humiliated there on his own and have nothing to do. I could see him going to Africa, perhaps. I know there's a problem with his brother and his father, but I don't think he's necessarily going to spend the rest of his life in America if anything went wrong. And what I do hear, and I have friends who come across Meghan and Harry, is that she's very independent. She can stand on her own 2 feet without him if needs be. I think he needs her, funny enough, more than the other way around. I think
things have changed.
Things have changed.
There's been a power imbalance.
She was a little embarrassed by some of the, let's say, the kind of sexier sort of slightly sexist elements of Spare, all the stuff about the frozen Todger and losing his virginity, which is very Hooray Henry kind of stuff. It's not sort of woke Californian stuff at all. So they are an odd couple. We have to... You can't sort of skirt around or deny that. They are an odd couple.
Ernest?
I think the way you're describing parts of America is hilarious. I think anyone watching from the U.S. calling it woke California would laugh. Now, L.A., sure, but not the rest of California, not the rest of the country. And I would say on many fronts that this is a situation that it just seems like, a bunch of rubbish. Like, I don't know where this is coming from. It's based on somebody's theory that it just isn't going to play out. And I just feel like this is the same thing that happened with the coronation. Everyone was like, oh, Prince Harry's not going to be there. He was there. Like, it's always these theories, and then they always get debunked. And then
she wasn't there.
Certainly, but you can't say, nobody can say that a marriage is going to last forever, though, can they?
Okay, they can, but it's not going to be immediate. I would think.
Yes, let Ingrid come in.
They went through everything together.
Okay, let Ingrid come in.
All this stuff, and I just think it's hilarious that you all think that now is going to be the doom.
Okay, let Ingrid come in.
I agree with you. I don't think Harry will come back. I think Harry's life is now in America. And also, even if he's not with Meghan, girls are going to fall all over him. Harry is a prince of the blood. He always will be. He's never going to be short of female company. And I think he would like to remain. And I don't think for a moment he and Meghan will separate or get divorced.
Okay.
I don't think that's what she wants or needs either.
Ingrid, can I just ask you
to be where his children are?
Okay, Ingrid, can I just ask you about this extraordinary court case that's going on at the moment? Prince Harry versus Mirror Group newspapers. Today, that odd little bloke, Omid Scobie, now you'll remember him, he's like a propagandist for Harry and Meghan. He wrote the book Finding Freedom. He turns up in court to give evidence that on a week's work experience at the Sunday People newspaper, so he was the work experience kid, but apparently he was being told all about the illegal practices taking place at the newspaper. But I've already found some evidence that suggests he's not necessarily the most truthful man. Because in Finding Freedom, Ingrid, Scobie wrote of Prince Harry, I don't have his phone number, I've never socialised with him before. Sorry, that was what he said in court today. I don't have his phone number, I've never socialised with him before. In Finding Freedom, he writes, Harry confessed to me at a small drinks gathering. So has he lied today, Ingrid, or did he lie in his book?
Well, I think I don't believe he would be stupid enough to lie in court, but I do find it very odd that as, you know, a work experience journalist, anyone would talk to him about phone hacking or anything else. I don't believe that. But it's possible that Scobie met Harry, but did, you know, because journalists do meet members of the royal family and don't exactly take their telephone numbers. So that is possible that he met.
I know, but Petronella, the point is, the point is, Petronella, he was at work experience,
yes,
right? You've worked in newspapers for years. Do you really think on a week's work experience? And by the way, if he did know about this illegality at the Sunday People newspaper, why did he not come forward years ago? Why has he only come forward now? Because this work experience was right back in, I think, 2004.
Well, it is certainly inconsistent, and it sounds as if there's a bit of a teeny-weeny sort of cover-up going on.
Yeah. Well, I'll just repeat. Today in court, Mr. Scobie says, I've never socialised with him before. In Finding Freedom, he writes, Harry confessed to me at a small drinks gathering. There you go. But look, thank you so much to Ernest Owens, Petronella Wyatt, Ingrid Seward. We always love having you here. But of course, back to our clash question. Is former Labour Minister and diarist Chris Mullin right to claim in a controversial new book that Prince Harry will come limping home to the UK when his marriage to Meghan, quote, ends in tears? These are his words, by the way, not mine. Chandler on Twitter writes, of course it will end in tears. Harry will come back with his tail between his legs and King Charles. Ever the diplomat will welcome him back. From Tony, he may come limping home, but it was his choice to dish the dirt and stop working, so he will get no sympathy or a warm welcome from me if he does return. And Julie writes, Meghan has got what she wanted. The title, Harry is now dispensable. Watch this space for a new billionaire husband. Oh, that's harsh. Your verdict is now in. 85% of you agree with the former Labour Minister Chris Mullin that Prince Harry will come limping back to the UK. 15% of you think that is wrong. Now, coming up, as the trans Starbucks employee behind this horrific attack is revealed as a hard-left activist, how did the victims Vanessa Thomas and Mark Andrews feel for being abused simply for calling a staff member lady? They both join me live in the studio for a TV exclusive soon. But first, the Tory business giant Lord Peter Cruddas makes a £1 million offer to the Prime Minister to return democracy to the party. Have the Conservatives become left-wing? My exclusive sit-down with Boris Johnson's biggest backer at the Conservative Democratic Conference is coming up straight after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Calvin Mackenzie has the latest on the Philip Schofield crisis engulfing ITV very soon. But first, my exclusive interview with British business giant and Boris Johnson's biggest backer, Lord Peter Cruddas. A multi-million-pound Conservative Party donor of recent years, he founded the Conservative Democratic Organisation in a bid to ensure the party reflects Tory members and their views in the wake of Rishi Sunak's premiership. The CDO held its first conference in Bournemouth this weekend, where Cruddas outlined to me his fears that the Tories have become so left-wing that he'd donate a staggering £1 million if the Prime Minister simply picks up the phone and promises to restore conservatism to the Conservative Party. This is a really important event.
It is.
For people who don't understand what the Conservative Democratic Organisation is, how would you describe it?
Well, what we are is an organisation that specifically set itself up because they feel disenfranchised from the leadership. The members voted for 2 Prime Ministers, and both Prime Ministers were removed not by the members but by the Conservative Parliamentary Party, and they've had enough.
But the huge issue here is that we have a Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who has never been endorsed by the members of the party that he leads.
That's right. Even worse, they voted against it.
Yeah.
And
in large numbers.
In large numbers. It cannot be right for a sitting Prime Minister with a massive majority to be removed by a small group of MPs.
It wasn't just Tory MPs, it was also the political establishment, the blob, the Snivel service, as I call them, conspiring with the media to make it impossible for a democratically elected Prime Minister to do his job.
What you're seeing is the Conservative Party changing from a centre-right party into a centre-left party.
Really?
I think the party's been hijacked by left-leaning Europhile people.
So you want to save the Conservative Party?
Well, yes. I want the Conservative Party to revert back into a centre-right party of low taxes, borders, I mean, we can talk about it all day, less government interference. I don't think you're seeing that now. I mean, and don't forget, our 2019 manifesto said that we would leave the European Union, we would repeal European laws, and now that looks like that's being reversed. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the Conservative Party that is anti-democratic.
So do you worry that if your movement isn't successful, we end up effectively being a one-party state?
If we don't change now as a party, what you'll end up with is two left-leaning parties. You'll have Labour, that is probably extreme left, and the Conservative, which is
centre-left.
Centre-left.
You have pumped in a lot of your own personal fortune into the party. Are you considering withdrawing that financial support?
I have stopped donating to the Conservative Party because I'm so disgusted with not only the removal of a sitting Prime Minister, but the reversal of the 2019 manifesto. I would love to be able to donate to the Conservative Party tomorrow, providing it reverts back to centre-right policies and supports members. And the way to do that is very simple. Rishi Sunak can call me up today and say to me, Peter, we've seen the CDO, what they're proposing, the constitutional changes, come in and make those changes to the party. Let's give more democracy back to the members.
And if he did that tomorrow, you would be back in?
If he did that tomorrow, I'd donate £1 million.
Wow.
His members are angry. They're not angry so much that Boris, as a personality, was removed. They're angry because people did that without their say-so.
They do want him back, though, don't they?
Well, why not? If that's what they want.
I speak to lots of allies close to Boris Johnson. They all tell me that he's ready to serve again and that he would be prepared to come back and lead the Conservative Party again. Is that the sense that you get?
Well, so first of all, I've not had that conversation with Boris or any of his advisors. The only advice I gave to Boris, not directly, to a couple of his advisors, is that if he does come back, if he wants to come back, it cannot be on the same terms as before. He cannot have people stabbing him in the back, which is what happened to him. You know, this was a democratically elected Prime Minister of our country. If you respect democracy, then you should say, you know, come back and finish the job. If you've got a plot, I mean, there was secret meetings, there was collusions, there was orchestrated resignations. People were chattering to each other about what to do next and how to remove our Prime Minister. That was not just against Boris, but also against the electorate, and it's unacceptable. CDO wants to stop that sort of nonsense in the future, change the constitution so no sitting Prime Minister can ever be removed by a small group of people with vested interests.
Could Boris Johnson win the next general election for the Conservative
Well, I
Party?
think he's got a better chance than anybody else in our party because he knows how to engage. I mean, if you look at his track record as a campaigner, he's a brilliant campaigner. He could turn things around, I'm sure. But whoever fights the next election, they need one thing. They need the support of the members.
So you don't think Rishi Sunak
can win the next general election.
Not without the members. You saw what happened in the council elections. A lot of party members, they're still so angry.
They stayed home.
They stayed home. They didn't go out and campaign in force. And we already came, I mean, we already lost, I think, 1,300 seats under Theresa May. We lost another 1,000. We're already at a low point. You would think that we could have some successes. Now, if Rishi wants to win the next election, he has to come out now and say, look, what happened to Boris was wrong. And we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. This is about the long-term good of the Conservative Party. So what I'm going to do is I'll fight the next election with a change in the Constitution, get the members behind me and have a really good run at it.
Coming up, as Suella Braverman hits back at critics by saying it's not racist to want to curb migration. Why are the left's Open Borders Brigade so desperate to brand those trying to stop the boats as bigoted? My superstar panel return to debate that shortly, but first I'll be joined by the victims of this horrific attack by a trans Starbucks employee who's since been exposed as a hard-left activist. What's it like to come under verbal and physical attack by a gender extremist for simply calling someone a lady? Well, Vanessa Thomas and Mark Andrews recount their terrifying tale in a TV exclusive next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tomorrow's newspaper front page is hot off the press coming up, but first, shocking new details have been revealed about the trans employee at Starbucks who was sacked after accusing a customer of being transphobic in a violent altercation. So 28-year-old Luna Spain kicked off after Vanessa Thomas, who works as a carer, addressed a second trans woman as a lady when the person apparently identifies as non-binary. Now, Vanessa's partner, Mark Andrews, a builder, was then attacked by Spain for filming the incident at an outlet in Southampton. Now, we played you this last week, but here's a reminder of what went down.
You didn't start being transphobic. You're rude. Absolutely not. Don't ever call me transphobic. Ever. You do not know me. You're being transphobic, Karen. Now get out. Call me transphobic. You are transphobic. Now get out. I want a refund. You're not having one. Go to the police. Hi, get out. Absolutely. You are trespassing now. They've got cameras. You are trespassing. Get out. Get out. You are trespassing.
Apparently, Will said something transphobic.
You actually, you battered.
Give me the phone. You want some? Give me the phone. Let go of me. Give me the phone. I've got plenty of.
So shocking, wasn't it? Well, Luna remains under investigation by police for alleged assault. And this weekend, the Mail Online discovered she is a hard-left trans activist whose neighbours are terrified of, quote, offending her by mistakenly saying the wrong thing. So now, speaking out for the first time since their horrific attack, I'm delighted to be joined live in the studio by the victims, Vanessa Thomas and Mark Andrews. So, Vanessa, that was absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but all that had happened is that you had asked a service staff member working at Starbucks who looked to be a woman.
Yeah.
You had referred to her as a lady.
Yeah. We'd paid for our goods. We tried to pay with cash, and they obviously said that they don't take cash anymore, and we just exchanged that. Not a good society that doesn't take cash anymore.
Of course.
But we paid with a card.
That's a whole other discussion, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Cashless society. But yes, you paid by card.
And then the manager, she stepped in and said, have you got a mobile phone? And I said, yes. And she said, well, they know where you are then, quite aggressively already. And I said, but they don't know what I spend. My money is, you know, if I want to spend in cash, I can. I just proceeded...
And this manager, we believe, is Luna Spain.
Absolutely, yeah.
Who is a trans woman.
Yeah. Yeah. I just proceeded to get my coffee and she just kept on... I wasn't even sure what she was talking about, but she just kept on at me. And I just put my hand up and said, I actually was not speaking to you, I was speaking to the lady that served me. And then she just erupted.
Because you had called a person who looked like a lady a lady.
Yeah. Yeah.
But apparently she is non-binary.
Which
you had no idea about.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, Mark, you're standing outside, you clearly know something's wrong, and so you start filming the altercation, and Luna Spain comes for you, and it looks like, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like Luna physically attacks you.
Oh, yes, she did, or they did. The manager did. At first, obviously, I could see through the footage on the camera, and I thought they were just going to come out and put their hand over the lens and stop me filming it. But she came out and just, like, went to grab the camera off me and then just embraced me and pushed me against the wall. And it took me by surprise because, obviously, I was just stood there with the shopping in one hand and the camera in the other hand.
Absolutely.
And then it just went from there. And then another member of the staff came out from the shop and encouraged the manageress to go back in, which she did. In doing so, foolishly, I didn't get the footage of the second half of it, but Luna then went back into the store and physically picked Vanessa up and carried her out to the front door and launched her out through the front door of the shop and then slammed the door and broke the door.
So Vanessa, you say you were also assaulted?
Absolutely.
Physically assaulted?
She'd grabbed my bag prior to this, before she came round the counter. She'd grabbed my handbag and just launched it above her head. It hit the ceiling and behind the counter, and I just asked for my bag back, which another member of staff gave me the bag back, and then she came round and that's when the abuse started. But she came back in the store after assaulting Mark, and I could see she was coming at me, and I told her, don't put your hands on me, and she just picked me up. and threw me out the door.
And I think what so many people watching the video really felt was this could have been us. Because you're very clear, you're not transphobic.
Absolutely not.
You
Absolutely
actually
not.
say to Luna, do not call me transphobic because you don't know me.
No.
And the issue is she also called you a Karen.
Absolutely.
So isn't it so terrible that we now have to tippy-toe around people like that who believe they have a right to change the English language, and if you don't sign up to their extreme ideology, they're going to treat you like that?
Yeah, absolutely gobsmacked, blown away. Absolutely. And I've got a lot of gay friends, massive supporters of, you know, horrified, absolutely horrified. Vanessa, that's just not you, you know. Yeah, absolutely blown away. Blown away.
Thank goodness you were filming, Mark, because are you worried that actually if you hadn't had your camera on, an accusation could have been made against both you and Vanessa that you had said something transphobic?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a saviour that we had that bit of footage ourselves.
And hopefully there'll be more footage if the police can get the Starbucks footage.
OK, so police are investigating. This Luna has lost their job. Are you hoping that charges are pressed against her? And also, would you be prepared to meet with Luna? Because we'd happily have Luna on this show, and perhaps there could be a discussion around this, because it feels like Luna maybe needs to learn where you were coming from and that you weren't coming from any negative place.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You know, I feel sad that actually the anger, whatever's going on with Luna, has caused this situation, because it really didn't have to be like that at all. So I feel quite sad that it's gone down that road, and she's lost her job. You know, that's, like I say, that's not who I am.
No.
I just wanted a coffee and go home.
Indeed. And look at what happened.
Yeah.
Well, look, Vanessa Thomas, Mark Andrews, so good to have you here. And it is very disturbing to see this extreme gender ideology coming to the streets of Southampton in the UK. I would never have believed we'd get to this point. But look, coming up, as Superwoman Suella hits out at Britain's Open Borders Brigade, is she right that it isn't racist to want to stop the boats? My superstar panel return to debate that soon. But next, is the former Labour Minister Chris Mullins right that Prince Harry, will come limping back to the UK when his marriage to Meghan ends in tears? That's the bombshell claim in a controversial new book. We'll debate whether he's right straight after this. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages hot off the press. See you in just 2 minutes' time.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, in a bombshell interview that could spark a fresh Tory civil war, one of the party's most influential figures, Priti Patel, has attacked the leadership of Rishi Sunak.
The centre of the party spent more time with us, listening, engaging, than I think it's fair to say we would not have seen over 1,000 of our friends and colleagues even lose their seats in recent local elections.
Don't miss my exclusive sit-down with the former Home Secretary at the launch of the Conservative Democratic organisation, where she'll reveal if it's time to bring back Boris. Meanwhile, the current Home Secretary continues to lead the charge against the Open Borders Brigade.
It's not xenophobic to say that mass and rapid migration is unsustainable in terms of housing supply, public services, or community relations.
So, with net migration set to reach the unprecedented figure of 1 million this year, is Superwoman Suella right that there's nothing bigoted about wanting to stop the boats? That's the big debate with my superstar panel next. And tonight, I'm joined by Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda de Lucy. Then I'll ask if the former Labour Minister Chris Mullins is right that Harry and Meghan's marriage will, quote, end in tears with the disgraced Duke limping home to the UK. Also on the way this hour, Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield tried to present a united front earlier. But as Phil enters crisis mode, calling in the lawyers and a PR expert, could the end be nigh for ITV's golden couple? Fleet Street icon Calvin McKenzie says Schofield's days are numbered. We'll reveal lots of exclusive information soon in Uncancelled. Plus, as Slippery Starmer reveals his plan to hand the vote to 16-year-olds as well as EU nationals who are without British citizenship, is the so-called reform actually just a left-wing power grab to freeze the Tories out forever? We'll tackle that later in the Media Buzz. And XR rabble-rousers protest about the climate and refugees at the weekend and today. So we asked if they would practice what they preach and house a migrant in their own homes.
If I had space.
You don't have space?
No.
Stay tuned to see the rest of those eco-hypocrites exposed. There'll also be a new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. So do stay up with us this hour. Plus, we've got the first front pages arriving in mere moments' time, right after the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. The top story tonight on GB News. The Home Secretary has insisted it isn't hypocritical for her, the child of migrants, to push for lower migration in the UK. In a speech earlier today, Suella Braverman defended the government's plan to cut net migration, saying it isn't racist to want to control borders. She also argued that mass and rapid migration would be a burden on housing and public services, saying the UK should instead be focusing on creating highly skilled workers at home.
There is no good reason why we can't train up enough truck drivers, butchers, fruit pickers, builders or welders. Brexit enables us to build a high-skilled, high-wage economy that is less dependent on low-skilled foreign labour.
The UK will train Ukraine's pilots to fly Western fighter jets, but it has no plans to provide them with the actual planes. At a meeting at Chequers today, the Prime Minister told President Zelensky that providing warplanes wasn't straightforward. But Rishi Sunak did promise further air defence missiles and drones under the condition they were only to be used over Ukrainian soil.
One thing we will be doing, starting actually relatively soon, is training of Ukrainian pilots, and that's something that we've discussed today. We're ready to implement those plans in relatively short order, which will mean that we're training Ukrainian citizens to become absolutely combat-ready aircraft pilots.
Well, President Zelensky said that air power is an important issue for his country's defence.
Today we spoke about the jets, very important topic for us, because we can't control the sky, you know it. So I think you know everything deeply because we're real partners. Rishi knows all the details, what's going on our battlefield. Thank you very much. And we want to create this JETS coalition.
Now, a former Met police officer allegedly missed an opportunity to properly investigate Wayne Couzens before he murdered Sarah Everard. Samantha Lee attended a disciplinary hearing today, accused of failing to make the correct investigative inquiries over 2 incidents when Couzens exposed himself to female staff at a restaurant in Kent. It's claimed there were issues with witness statements and evidence, and her investigative work was allegedly rushed. Miss Lee is said to have breached the force's standards on duties and responsibilities, charges she denies. The hearing's expected to last several days. And the police watchdog is investigating after an 11-year-old boy was tasered at a holiday park in Scotland. Police were called to a caravan park near Ayr just after 11 o'clock on the evening of the 22nd of March. The child, who was holding a knife, fell to the ground after being tasered. Police Scotland say the incident has been referred to the Investigations and Review Commissioner. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz, and let's kick off with a very first look at the front pages hot off the press. And The Guardian leads with accusations against Home Secretary Suella Braverman that she is trying to undermine the Prime Minister after her speech on migration today at the National Conservatism Conference. Funny that, given Rishi said he totally supported her. The Metro also leads with Braverman's critical speech, which aimed warning shots at Sunak over rising immigration. Now, my superstar panel rejoin me now. Top Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the former MEP and political commentator Belinda de Lucy. Now, as we just saw, Braverman was the headline speaker at that NatCon conference today, and with net migration set to hit 1 million this year, she refused to sugarcoat the unsustainable numbers entering the UK. The Home Secretary declared that Britain has become too dependent on foreign labour, a warning shot to the Tory wets in the Cabinet currently blocking her mission to reduce immigration. And Braverman also hit out, ironically given that front page, at The Guardian reading Rokorati, who falsely claim that her plans are somehow immoral and racist. Look.
We need to get overall immigration numbers down. And we mustn't forget how to do things for ourselves. There is no good reason why we can't train up enough truck drivers, butchers, fruit pickers, builders or welders.
It's not xenophobic to say that mass and rapid migration is unsustainable in terms of housing supply, public services or community relations. Nor is it bigoted to say that we have too many asylum seekers in this country for whom we have insufficient accommodation.
Carol Malone, of course there's nothing racist about wanting to curb unmanageable mass migration.
Absolutely, there's nothing xenophobic about saying as many people as are coming here illegally are coming. It's absolutely... And she's right, you know, we don't have the infrastructure to sustain it. We don't have the housing, we don't have the healthcare, we don't have the education. But, you know, I think, you know, what we've got to get across here to people is that the British people are not against immigration. We're not. What we're against is illegal, uncontrolled immigration. Yes, I get that 1 million people coming last year is too much, and it can't be in those numbers. But I think, you know, the latest British Social Attitude Survey said people wanted immigration, and they accepted that we did need some foreign labour. But what they don't want, they hate the chaos, and they hate the fact that we don't know who's coming in here, and that's what's happening. We're getting people
Benjamin,
coming.
you're
You're
one of the people, aren't you, saying that Suella Braverman is racist and xenophobic. How do you justify that?
No, actually, the only reason she brings words like racist and xenophobic into that speech is because she is trying to distract from the fact that she is completely failing at stopping these boats coming into the country and causing the problem. She is using language like that because this hopeless government wants a culture war to distract people from its failings on basic policy.
This is tosh. The civil service are the people who are supposed to be processing
Always
all the
someone else's fault.
No, the fact of the matter is, one asylum seeker gets processed every 18 months by the civil service for the simple reason that they don't want this policy to work. So the civil service is thwarting the government's every attempt to control immigration, as are leftist lawyers who are telling them how to break the law to stay in this country.
Whatever happened to Conservatives thinking you should take responsibility
So,
for
okay,
yourself?
so if we-
it's
if we-
always
okay,
someone else's fault with this
what
lot.
would happen if Rishi went into the Channel and turned the boats back? What would you be saying about that?
If they opened a place to sort them in Calais, they wouldn't
You'd be
boats.
hysterical.
That's what we
Belinda DeLucy, you come in here.
OK, rapid mass immigration to a small, overcrowded island where our own people can't even get the housing, the doctor's appointment, the school places as it is one of the biggest political scandals in my lifetime. And the Conservative and the Labour Party have both overseen this. In 1997, there was net migration of 47,000. We're now creeping up to the 600 to a million. We do not have the infrastructure, and it does affect community cohesion, national unity, demos. We don't feel connected to our communities because there's no effort by the government to integrate the people who come here. And it's not about immigrants. I don't blame them at all. It's about dodgy government policy that just wants cheap labour on a mass scale.
And she's right, you know, when Suella's right when she said, you know, why can't we train up our own fruit pickers and our own
You
truck
go and do
drivers?
it then.
Let me
I
finish
used to
then.
do it as a
Well,
student all the
I've got
time.
a job. Why would I go and do it? I've got a job. But I'll tell you who hasn't.
You're happy to patronise other people.
The 500,000 people who are sitting on benefits now who refuse to take a job. Those people should be made to take work. There should be a 3 strikes and you're out policy. Get offered 3 jobs, and if you don't take the 3rd one, your benefits get stopped. I'm sorry, we can't have people sitting idle in this country saying, "Oh, I don't fancy going to pick the fruit pickers."
But you can sorry, can we just bring some facts into this? First of all, there are more vacancies than there are people unemployed.
Because people are too
and
lazy.
Secondly, Belinda talks about the fact that they can't get school spaces. Well, the truth is that actually we have an excess of school places because we have such a dramatically falling birth rate. So that's just not true. The truth is, there are primary schools closing all over the country. It's a real problem. And the other point... I can't
argue, but I can't believe that.
It is, because people aren't having any kids. The birth rate is collapsing.
Encourage families to have more children, and instead
Yes,
not
we should.
expanding their families because they can't afford the houses, so they import more immigrants, which makes the house pricing goes up, less houses, and it's a horrible circle.
We have 500,000 people in this country sitting on benefits who could be worth
5 million.
And who aren't.
5 million.
Well, I'm ready for you to go fruit picking.
Now, look,
What's wrong with
earlier
fruit
in the
picking?
show...
Can I just say, why is fruit picking a nonsense job? It's a job.
Because it's ridiculous. I want people
You'd
in this
rather have
country...
people sponging off us on Benefit Street. No. That's what you're about, isn't it?
It's
you think fruit picking is a job below people, so actually they should stay sponging off taxpayers.
No.
That's how the left thinks. And Carol's right. It's totally wrong. It's disgraceful.
Patronising
patronising.
right-wing elite like you lot sit here telling other people to go and pick fruit when you'd never
Do you know
have
what?
done that.
Yeah,
I sorted
I have
coat
it as a
hangers
job.
for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. It was the worst job of my life. But you know what? I did it to fund my way to university.
The left never ever care.
Jobs as kids.
Carol, the left never care about stripping poor countries of their workforce as long as they get their lattes made in Pret and their feet washed in
Do you
the
not have lattes?
Disgusting.
And their cocaine imported, by the way, via county lines gangs. Now, look, moving on, earlier in the show, I told you that odd little mouthpiece for Harry and Meghan Markle, Omid Scobie, was giving evidence today in the Duke's phone hacking trial against Mirror Group newspapers. I think I've proved that he either told a porcupine in court or in his book, because he said, in his book, he said, I've been for a drinks party with Prince Harry. And in court today, he said, I've never socialised with Prince Harry. But not everyone from the left appears to be buying the Sussex's tales of victimhood, with respected diarist and former Labour MP Chris Mullin launching an unprecedented attack against Harry and Meghan in his latest book. And Didn't You Used to Be Chris Mullin, the Labour grandee's latest memoir, Mullin slams Meghan as, quote, cuckoo with, quote, woke Californian hang-ups, and he claims, quote, second fiddle Harry would eventually, quote, limp back to Britain when his marriage to Meghan eventually, quote, ends in tears. So... Benjamin, this is interesting, isn't it? A prominent left-wing figure now turning on Harry and Meghan. Are you with him or against him on this?
I mean, look, he might be a former Labour minister and he's a very accomplished writer, but lots of his writing is fiction, and I think this firmly is in that category. Look, Chris Mullen doesn't know what's happening in Harry and Meghan's wedding, or their marriage, rather. I think they look madly in love. When we saw them at that sports game in the US, they looked delighted. I think they're a happy couple.
She didn't even want to kiss him in public at
I
that
think it's
game.
pretty morbid, sitting on talk shows saying that you should try and have them divorced. They look like a happy couple. I hope they stay together. I hope for the sake of their kids and their family, they're all delighted.
Well, Chris Mullen's allowed to have an opinion on this, and Carol, you have a very strong opinion.
And I have said this from day one, that yes, I mean, I do believe Meghan will leave him eventually. I do, because, and she does this, the history of her relationship, she does it very quickly and very, very suddenly. The person doesn't know. Yeah, she just gets rid of them. So when that happens, and I think he will come crawling back here, what else will he do? He can't make a life in America. And the sad thing, I think, well, it's not going to be sad for him, but I think the family will welcome him back and they will take him back.
But you think that's wrong?
Well, no, you know, I don't think it's wrong to ostracise anyone, because he's going to be broken when he gets back here. Because remember, if he comes back here...
So you say win, not if?
Oh, I think it's win. Because, remember, she will have the kids, and I think that will break him, so he'll come back here as a broken man. And I think his family will take him back in. It would, you know, it seems, on the one hand, it seems wrong because he has trashed them, but on the other hand, you know, he is part of the family, and they will take him, I'm sure.
Well, I rather miss the sort of cheeky, jokey Prince Harry. He's been sanitised by the sort of Californian psychobabble woke culture, and I think he's probably quite lonely with it and misses his mates. But he's obsessed with Meghan and deeply in love. I can't imagine him ever leaving her. However, once she's sort of rinsed him for as much as she can,
she goes to everyone
I can imagine her moving on.
Her dad, her sister, her ex-husband, she goes to everyone. I actually think Chris Mullins is totally right on this. Belinda DeLucy, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, thank you so much, and do stand by, because coming up, does Keir Starmer have an ulterior motive for giving 16-year-olds and EU nationals the vote? Yep. And could his proposal be an insidious attempt to reverse Brexit? Absolutely. So my Superstar fan will return to debate that shortly. But next, after becoming the biggest Tory heavy hitter to attack the leadership of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, is the PM overseeing a managed decline of the Tories, and should Boris Johnson now return to lead the party? My exclusive sit-down with the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, coming up after this short break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop
failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Our exclusive coverage of the Conservative Democratic Organisation conference continues now with Tory heavy hitter Priti Patel. The former Home Secretary marked the weekend with one of the most blistering attacks yet on Rishi Sunak, claiming the Prime Minister was overseeing the, quote, managed decline of the Conservative Party while Keir Starmer surges on Downing Street. In front of a live audience bursting with faithful but disillusioned Tory members, we spoke about Boris Johnson's return, Partygate, the SNP, local election drubbings, and why those in the upper echelons of the party need to rediscover true conservatism.
We now have a civil service, a woke blob, whatever you want to call them, working in tandem with the mainstream media in this country. And I think that is something that the Conservative Party really need to start thinking about.
Our institutions, let's be honest, this is about our established institutions. They have a particular dislike to the Conservative Party, that's self-evident. But also, it's not just about us, us as a party. It's what we stand for, it's our beliefs. We got an 80-seat majority, but yet you think about the way in which, dare I say, the machinery of the state responds. No. Everything is like computer says no. You can't do this, rather than how can we help you to deliver on your priorities?
Because it feels to me like what the Conservative Party leadership and certainly the parliamentary party have decided to do is give in to this blob. Now, my argument, Priti, would be they don't want to work with you, they want to destroy you. So do you think the parliamentary leadership needs to change its approach?
You can be strong as a leader, as a Secretary of State, to get what you need out of the system. I'm going to call it the system because, quite frankly, it is. It's the states, the civil service, government departments, everything that's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and woker, as we know. But, as a political leader, we can't also just sort of attribute blame for our own failures. Because at the end of the day, we were the ones with the mandate.
And it's maybe the first time that the rest of the media is thinking, actually, this coup didn't work last year. Because do you agree with me that the local election results were an unmitigated disaster for Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party, and make it very likely that unless there is change, which is obviously what this conference is about, you are facing a thumping at the general election under Rishi Sunak?
So we want to avoid that. The election results were terrible for us as a party, collectively. And as I've said earlier on in my remarks, there's a range of reasons for that. Last year had a lot to do with it. People feel disillusioned. Our members feel disillusioned. They think that, parliamentary party does not represent the views of the majority of our grassroots. I can concur with that as well. A lot of people I meet every day say this too. So we can change this by mobilising the base, being honest, being truthful, being respectful, not trying to, cancel everybody out. And also, remember, we've just lost over 1,000 councillors. And I do feel strongly about that because I believe in Conservative representation.
Now, I've spoken to a lot of senior Conservatives in Westminster over the past week in preparation for today, and they tell me of a fear that Rishi Sunak doesn't believe he can win the next election and that he is preparing to lose in a dignified manner. What's your take on that?
I mean, look, come on. You cannot be leader of our great, successful political party and not have hunger, drive, ambition to do the best that you possibly can for our amazing country, right?
Because you talked earlier in your speech about a fear of managed decline. So what can he do specifically to turn that around?
Stand up for conservatism. So we've heard consistently today, we know what we stand for, and also we are patriotic, we love our country, you know, we believe that we can be better as a nation. And that also means speaking to the hopes and aspirations of the British people. Quite frankly, that is the most exciting thing about being in politics, right? The battle of ideas.
Okay, let's talk about the big blonde elephant in the room, because he might not be here today, but all you need to do is speak to any of the activists here today or look at the results of the GBNews poll, which we've had running in the foyer all day. And over 90% of people here say that they are Team Boris rather than Team Rishi. Isn't the solution obvious, Pretty?
We had an extraordinary success in the 2019 general election, but we got an 80-seat majority, and we won in parts of the country which had been untouched from conservatism for decades. Actually, there were some parts of the country that hadn't seen a Conservative MP since Margaret Thatcher, since '83. And we do owe Boris a debt of gratitude for that. And there are MPs in Westminster today that have to recognise that they're only MPs for the constituencies that they represent because of Boris. He is an electoral asset, in my view. London's been a tough gig for our party, right? But he was able to, you know, win in parts of the country, like London, where other Conservatives have failed. We're going to need him. We will need him to come back and re-galvanise and re-energise the grassroots as we go into an election.
A leadership challenge before the next
I'll
election.
be very candid. I don't think that's going to do us the world of good at all, and partly because of everything that the public saw last year. In parts of my constituency, bring back Boris. People were saying that to me very actively and feeling quite embarrassed about what has happened over the last 12 months. We have ejected, you know, in succession now, democratically elected leaders of our party. It happened to Margaret Thatcher. It happened to Boris. In my view, Boris would have won us the next election. It also happened to his successor, you know, a couple of months later, and that cannot be right.
But couldn't he still win you the next election? Isn't that the point?
Well, there you go. I mean, I just don't see, you know, the public right now, with where we are, we've got a job of work to do. As I've said, our reputation has taken a battering. It really has. So we have to rebuild off the back of these local elections. There's no doubt about it.
This Partygate witch hunt, as I call it, has not ended. The kangaroo court of the Privileges Committee is yet to rule. Now, it was reported late last week that Harriet Harman and Sue Gray, who is about to be Keir Starmer's chief of staff, met secretly in the preparation for this Privileges Committee. Why do you think there's not much focus on that, and does it not seem corrupt to you?
It just seems totally wrong. Totally wrong. It really does. Corruption, collusion, the lack of transparency, and this is a very sensitive subject in Westminster because it is the Privileges Committee. We all have to be very careful about how we refer to people and the committee, etc. But, you know, transparency is important. And there has been zero transparency. There's been too much hearsay, meetings behind closed doors. And in a way in which, I'm sorry to say this, but, you know, this has been a very degrading process, hasn't it? Very humiliating and just not right for some...
For a piece of cake. And I'm sorry, Pretty, can you understand the anger when you look at what's going on in Scotland with the SNP and scheming Sturgeon, and the media for 2 years have not reported on that when they were obsessed with a piece of cake?
So this does come back down, though, doesn't it, to your point when we started the discussion this afternoon about the mainstream media, how selective it has been in terms of filtering information, the lack of focus, lack of focus on Scotland, SNP, Sturgeon, and then zeroing in.
Scotland.
It's outrageous.
It's extraordinary.
And quite undemocratic again, and involving all sorts of, issues now. It looks like corruption basically as well in, the bowels of that particular party. And that will have big consequences at the general election. That could basically change the electoral composition of our country as well. So this matters when it comes to the health and well-being of the United Kingdom, the integrity of our democracy. There should be full scrutiny as to what has happened there.
Has Kemi Badenoch committed a Brexit betrayal this week?
I do feel very strongly that at the end of the day, we promised that we were going to have the bonfire of regulations. I was in government for over 3 years, and there was a lot of work that took place department by department, per department, on literally getting ready, doing the whole track of, what was going to go, what would be repealed, and all of this just seems to have just disappeared. Now, that might be the civil service, but as I said, as politicians, we have to lead, to govern is to choose. You cannot start diluting at this stage of a parliament when this parliament was elected to deliver on getting rid of these laws. And again, this is about trust. If we do not deliver, the British public will say, well, what have you been doing for 3 years? You've betrayed us, you've let us down.
And look, finally, I just want to ask you the question that I've been asking all of these great folk today. Team Boris or Team Rishi?
We're all Conservatives, right? We've got to focus on winning. And look, I am a massive supporter of Boris. There's no doubt about that. I'm deeply loyal as well on that basis. I was very loyal to Boris, and I would not change my position, by the way. I really wouldn't. He gave me the greatest privilege. I served in government alongside him as his Home Secretary. But right now, we've got to focus on winning. We've got to focus on rebuilding for decades to make sure that we have a say on the leadership, to make sure that you have a say on selections, to make sure your democratic voices are heard, and that makes a difference.
So thank you so much for all of your support
It's been
today.
brilliant, Dan. Thank you for being here as well.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for everything.
Now, coming up in Uncancelled, as the scandal hit, Philip Schofield calls in the lawyers and a PR expert. Is he bracing himself to be axed by woke ITV? Calvin McKenzie live in the studio with more information on this shortly. But next, in the media buzz, as slippery Starmer plans to hand the vote to 16-year-olds and EU citizens in a dictatorial, power grab, would a Labour general election win spell the end of a future Tory majority forever? My superstar panel return to debate that in just one moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz because I've got more front pages hot off the press. And the Daily Mail leads on comments from Michael Gove tonight, blasting Keir Starmer for trying to, quote, rig elections by plotting to give votes to non-British citizens. Meanwhile, Daily Mail columnist Jan Moore writes that she'd be surprised if fakers Holly and Phil survived the week on This Morning. More on that with Calvin McKenzie shortly. The Times reports that a fifth of taxpayers will now be in the 40p band, with Sunak facing mounting Tory unrest as he imposes the highest tax rates since the 1970s. Terrible stuff. And an important headline in the Daily Express, actually, Suella, white people should not feel guilty, as the Home Secretary hits out at the woke, who argue that white folk should feel collective guilt over their historical role in the slave trade. My superstar panel return now. Top Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the broadcaster and journalist Benjamin Butterworth, and the former MEP Belinda de Lucy. Now, perhaps realising that he won't attract enough votes to achieve a majority, slippery Starmer, as we just saw, is changing tact, instead trying to change who gets the vote. Speaking earlier today, the Labour leader suggested we should include 16-year-olds in the electorate, as well as EU nationals who are without British citizenship. Watch.
Big things you can do at 16 and 17. And again, it's not such an outlandish idea. In Wales, it already happens. In Scotland, it already happens. So again, we're looking at, voting. If someone has been here, say, 10, 20, 30 years, contributing to this economy, part of our community, they ought to be able to vote.
Make no mistake, despite Starmer acting like he has honest intentions, this move is so obviously a power grab to destroy the Conservatives as a political force, as was pointed out by Lord Cruddas at the CDO launch on Saturday.
If Labour wins a big majority at the next election, they will reduce the voting age to 16, they will abolish voter ID, and they will introduce proportional representation, making it almost impossible for the Conservatives to win an outright majority in the future.
And while woke teenagers turning up at the ballot box is one thing, many have rightly warned that allowing EU citizens to vote could be a precursor to a second Brexit referendum, enabling a return to Brussels. So, Belinda de Lucy, I'm sorry, this is Starmer trying to rig elections forevermore, is it not?
It's trying to chain our country to the dark corridors of Brussels through the back door. And if they can't persuade the current electorate, which they clearly dislike and hold with great disdain, they'll import a new one. Or they'll just extend it to anyone around the world who agrees with their policies. It is rigging the election, and it smacks of a party that has no faith in its own arguments. If it can't convince the current electorate of its arguments, it should change its arguments, not increase the franchise to
non-Brits.
16-year-olds
voting. That is a joke. And if EU citizens want to vote, go and become a citizen of this great country.
Dan, on the first day you got off the plane and landed in Britain, did you have the vote here?
Yes, I did.
So why should
Because I'm a British citizen. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. How dare you? How dare you, you racist?
No, you haven't.
I'm sorry. My parents were born in this country. My grandparents fought for Britain in the war. So how dare you talk about my lineage like that?
No, I will, because someone from New Zealand or Australia or Canada has the vote the day they arrive.
That's nothing
in this
to...
country.
No. Well,
and so,
no. I'm just going to fact check you.
No,
I'm going to fact check you because you're actually conflating two separate things. I am a British citizen, by the way. Let me be very clear on that, and I'm very proud of it, and I have been since birth. And when it comes to citizens of the Commonwealth, do you not understand that they should be treated differently because we share a head of state? That matters to me, our joint heritage.
Actually, I think the fact that an 18-year-old from Australia gets the vote to decide who our Prime Minister is after 24 hours, after 1 hour in this country, and yet someone who's paid taxes here for 30 or 40 years doesn't.
Well, if they've paid taxes here for 30 or 40 years, why have they not become a citizen?
How come is it OK for EU citizens who have, quote, settled here to vote when the arrangement is not reciprocal? Last year, the EHCR voted that UK people could not vote in France nor in the rest of the EU. So if they've said that we can't, why should we afford them?
Why can't we mirror
so
that?
we know why. But can I also just say about 18-year-olds taking about 16-year-olds taking the vote? 16-year-olds in this country can't have a credit card, they can't buy alcohol, they can't buy cigarettes, and they can't get married. So why the hell do you think they're politically mature enough at the age of 16?
Presumably because they vote Labour.
To vote. Because they're going to...
Yes, they do. The political indoctrination
If you don't vote Labour at 16, there's something wrong with you.
I just think it's pure hypocrisy.
Young people vote Labour
Dan
at 16.
thinks a Kiwi who's never paid a penny tax in this country should decide our Prime Minister, but not someone from France who's lived here for 40 years.
If someone from France has lived here for 40 years and they want to vote in our election, go and become a British citizen. Follow the process that is in place in order to do that.
If you pay tax here, you should have a vote.
No, that's
you
not
sound like the
citizenship.
people
No, you should
opposing
not.
the suffragettes. You're terrified of democracy.
Oh,
You're
my
scared
God.
of more
I
voters.
tell you who's scared.
It's weak,
Keir Starmer.
weak.
Keir Starmer is terrified of democracy. He knows he can't win outright in this
more
country.
people to vote.
And
You don't.
he realised when he saw the results of the local elections, he thought it was going to be much worse for the Tories. He realises he can't get a majority. So not only is he doing a deal with the Lib Dems,
It's a real
this is
insult to
desperation writ large.
It is. Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth, Belinda DeLucy do stand by. But Extinction Rebellion proved their juvenile credentials today by storming the stage at the National Conservatism Conference in London. This is the moment swivel-eyed leftists interrupted my colleague Jacob Rees-Mogg and Home Secretary Suella Braverman during their brilliant speeches.
National Conservatism. A few characteristics of fascism.
Well, thank you very much.
Defining.
Funnily enough, those XR Sawyer soldiers also turned up to the Conservative Democratic Organisation conference that my team attended in Bournemouth over the weekend. So I sent Ben Leo out with a camera and microphone to see what they were made of. And he had unsurprising results.
What would your signs say? Oh, I have two different signs. All refugees welcome, no to Rwanda, deportation, stop the flights.
How can we help them? Where should we house them?
Oh, in houses, yeah.
What's nasty about, say, Jacob Rees-Mogg? What's your flag about?
So this is the Extinction Rebellion logo.
Right. Do you know what % of global emissions the UK is responsible for?
I don't actually know the figure off the top of my head, I'm afraid.
Don't speak to GB News. Speak in an echo chamber where we hear our own views. I think there's a Home Office scheme where you can house a migrant. Would you like to sign up for that?
Well, if I had space.
You don't have space?
No.
You not got a spare room for an Albanian?
I don't think so, no.
OK. You don't want to talk? Why did you come here to hold a sign and not want to engage in discussion? Do you know what % of global emissions the UK is responsible for? Why don't you come out from behind the signs? There we go. There's your lovely face. What's wrong with Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example? So why do you keep banging a drum incessantly?
I think it's to interrupt you because he doesn't like you very much, nor do I.
It doesn't seem very, very democratic.
Great stuff. Now, coming up, did the hard-left rabble-rousers Marina Purkis and Gemma Forte, they'd fit in well with that lot, encourage violence with their shocking Cull the Tories T-shirts? We'll discuss as we reveal tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, in Uncancelled, as Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby make an awkward return to This Morning after Phil called in the lawyers and a PR expert, are ITV's golden couple about to make an acrimonious split. Fleet Street legend Calvin McKenzie, he has the inside story on this. We're back in just 2 minutes' time.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, TV's golden couple Holly and Philip failed once again to convince This Morning viewers that they're a united duo as ITV bosses struggle to keep a lid on bombshell reports of an ongoing feud. Here are the pair's awkward bits from earlier.
Very nice. Wow. Thank you. What a way to start your Monday this morning. Welcome. That is so right lovely. Up your street.
So up my street.
For all of that, Giles Brandreth and Camilla Tominey join us now to discuss today's top headlines.
Skip to my side. Here you go. Give it a go. Don't hurt yourself.
Phil, put your knees on the ground.
Oh, they've got to stay on the ground?
Yeah, otherwise that's like...
Otherwise that you're really, yeah. Go out, come back. Ooh. That's it.
She just can't stand the bloke anymore, can she? Now, Phil has reportedly called in the lawyers and top PR gurus to tough it out rather than quit the show following a series of on- and off-air scandals. Now, I reported last week that Holly is preparing to go it alone after finally realising that Phil's antics could ruin her own reputation. And today, I revealed in a new column for Mail Online that there is a major growing revolt brewing backstage at the broadcaster from some of its biggest stars and a truckload of production staff, plus a lot of A-list guests, about the seeming double standards at play. How can ITV continue to stand by Philip despite a succession of scandals and complaints from highly credible fellow presenters, given the brutality with which it's discarded other stars, including Jeremy Kyle, Piers Morgan and Jeremy Clarkson? And Eamon Holmes, who was axed as This Morning's Friday presenter after standing up to Phil, who is now a colleague of mine here at GB News, had this to say about the quarrelling pair's uncomfortable performance earlier. Look.
I think there should have been a special award for Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby for Best Actors. They may or may not be together on the telly today, but he's brought in lawyers, she's brought in PR team. The public surely suss that there's no chemistry, that it's a broken fit between the two of them.
Calvin McKenzie, Eamon's right, isn't he? This is over now. I mean, it was an awful thing to have to witness this morning.
I think it's a ghastly commercial experiment by ITV. Right, so the daytime audience for This Morning is very important to them commercially. So they try and put these people together, hoping that the public will actually give them a spike, which is true. They will have a bigger audience today than they probably had in years.
Yeah, I was watching for one.
Exactly. Loads of people who wouldn't go anywhere near this morning were now thinking, whoa, and watching for all those little bits that you showed there. However, that will cut, the guilt will come off the gingerbread there, and then it'll be all down here. They are mad. I don't know why they're doing it. Why don't they just accept that after 14 years, they've had a bloody good run. Schofield actually, as this thing, I know you've got some personal angst there, and I don't blame you for it. Actually, he was perfectly all right to me. She was perfectly all right. And actually, they just ran out of speed. Many people don't have friendships that last 14 minutes, let alone 14 years.
But isn't the problem that neither of them want to give up the job? So you've got Holly saying, I'll keep doing this job. I'm the biggest star on TV.
Yeah.
I'll keep doing this job for you, but he's got to go.
Right, well, this is the problem. Right, he is the old stag now. He's 61. He's been a star most of his life, right? She started off as the young, gawky fawn, right? And slowly, as happens in life, and Dan, one day...
I'm prepared for it in a couple of months, Kelvin, to be honest.
I'm sure it will happen. It's happened to it goes like that, and she wants to be free and run the joint the way she wants it. He says, I'm not giving up anything, and that's where the issues are. Every office will know this feeling, except the trouble is it's now played out in front of millions of people, and the tabloids are having a field day.
Well, the thing that was interesting to me today, and I wrote about this for the Mail Online, lots of big A-listers are now saying we will have nothing to do with the signing.
Right, and they're right, because they don't want to be sitting there uncomfortably where there is a false atmosphere. They're trying to flog a movie, they're trying to flog a musical or something, and suddenly something said something, and one side said, well, I don't really agree with that, and the other, well, what's it got to do with you? They don't need it. There's lots of places for A-listers to go. They don't need to go on ITV.
So ITV is going to have to move fast on this, aren't
But they haven't moved fast, have they? They could have moved fast, but the issue is, of course, if you are Piers Morgan and you are a tabloid guy, then boom, out the door you go, rather than the weather guy.
Or Jeremy Clarkson.
Or Clarkson, yes, or Kyle, right, 100 miles an hour. But because there's a kind of a touchy-feely, show-busy feeling, they don't know what to do. It's the CEO of ITV, to my mind, is not up to this kind of job. She wasn't up to it at The Guardian, didn't do any good at EasyJet, and I think she should go, as well as whoever it is.
Well, all of the management have to go. They have mishandled this terribly because, remember, Holly first started expressing issues about Philip and this toxic atmosphere at ITV. And remember, at the time, when I was working on this story, I spoke to 8 household names at ITV who said there's terrible behaviour going on backstage. So ITV were warned about this years ago. It's been a ticking time bomb. And instead, they've allowed it to all play out on air. So at the very least, that's bad management, because what they could have tried to do is actually had some sort of succession plan in place and try and make it look to viewers, as they've done before, that this was Philip's choice to go.
But it's a massive job.
It's not going to be his choice to go.
It's a massive job, and the Schofield and Co do a good job on bizarre shows like Dancing on Ice and that kind of stuff. So there's a high valuation to them. But it's come to an end now, and actually they'd be doing the viewers a favour. Forget about their shareholders. Do the viewers a favour and just stop the row now.
Yeah, indeed, because it is painful to watch, that is for sure. Now, we reached out to ITV for comment regarding Holly and Phil's on-screen relationship and received no reply. Governor Mackenzie, thank you very much. But let's move on now to reveal tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel returned. Carol Malone, who's your nominee for tonight's Greatest Britain? OK,
mine is Jacob Rees-Mogg for saying what the majority of us think, and that's we could save billions of pounds by sacking idle civil servants. Huge swathes of the blob are still working from home, and they are now engaged in activity in trying to get rid of ministers. They won't process policies they don't like. Way too much powers. They're not scrapping the EU laws. Get rid of them. Get rid of them now.
Benjamin Butterworth, your nominee.
For Greatest Britain, it's Hannah Waddingham. She's the woman that hosted Eurovision. Now, I must be honest, I hadn't heard of her before. She was absolutely fantastic. I really rated her. And actually, it's lovely to celebrate Eurovision because Carol, by the looks of it, was representing Albania on Saturday night.
What does that mean? He's wanted to insult this shirt from the minute I came in. He thinks I look like the Albanian
flag. You did a great job, Carol.
You look stunning.
I was singing a lot.
Belinda DeLucy, your nominee.
My Greatest Brit is rising star Miriam Cates. She is a Tory MP, one of the few good eggs. Sadly, they're in the minority at the moment, but she has been publicly speaking about the threat to Western society of the falling birth rates in the UK.
We've got some of this, actually. Let's have a look.
There is one critical outcome that liberal individualism has completely failed to deliver, and that is babies.
No, Belinda, you're right. Good on her. Yeah. But look, he's a colleague of mine. He leads into this show. He's a great man. Of course, Jacob Rees-Mogg is tonight's Greatest Britain. Well done, Carol Malone. Union Jackass time now. Carol, who are you going for?
I'm going for slippery Keir Starmer for trying to make Britain into a one-party state by allowing 4 million people from the... He says this is what he do. Allowing 4 million people from the EU to vote and allowing 16-year-olds to vote. It's desperation from a desperate man.
Benjamin Butterworth, your nominee.
Mine is the Conservative MP Miriam Cates, who used the far-right...
Who just got Belinda's GB nominee.
Who used the far-right anti-Semitic term cultural Marxism today, which Jewish leaders have heavily criticised. How can you sit there when you talk about the Guardian cartoon that was definitely anti-Semitic and yet defend this?
I'll tell you why. Because I've been accused of anti-Semitism for using the word globalist. We've got to distinguish between real anti-Semitism, which was absolutely that Guardian cartoon, and actually the use of language, which is completely appropriate and inappropriate.
The term
for
cultural Marxism is a far-right anti-Semitic term, and you know it.
I totally disagree. I think you're speaking total smack. Belinda DeLucy, your nominee.
Yes, it's a joint nominee for Jackass. It is Marina Purkiss and Gemma Forte. Yes, it's the tolerant lefties again, inciting hatred and violence against Conservatives. They posted a photo of them in T-shirts saying, "Save the badgers, cull the Tories." Again, it's the hashtag Be Kind lot who want to encourage hatred towards people who vote differently from them. They have no authority now to talk about bullying, unkindness or inciting hatred against people. Typical hypocrites from the left.
What despicable women they are. And they are tonight's Union Jackass. This awful Marina Purkiss, equally awful Gemma Forte. Cull the Tories. What sickos after what happened to David Amos? Makes me so angry. Belinda DeLucy, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, my superstar panel, thank you for your company on what has been a very busy Monday night of news. I'm back again tomorrow from 9 p.m. Headliners next. Good night.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Doobs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale